I was raised in Romania during a dictatorship.
The destruction of books is the first victims of any form of dictatorship.
The language played a very important role. Theater was important. Language was a very important part of your identity and the identity of belonging to a certain community. Art and literature was a form of escaping from this reality. Reading was one of the few things you could do as a free person. So to read was also a form of resistance. Language is always very much controlled by, so to speak, evil powers. I think literature can really do something to take back those very badly loaded words and to give them a new aura, new sense and new stories. Is it possible to have two homes?
Book of Silences, that's me at the moment. Good evening. Thank you for being here. Before I begin formally, I have an informal remark, which has to do with the fact that just before the beginning of this, about an hour ago, this is for you, I was standing outside and being nervous, and there was a young person who walked by who just said hello, stopped and said, "You have an event today?" I said, "Yes." And she sat there and took 5 minutes to understand what the events were, and I said, "I'm very nervous." So she said something that was very helpful. She said, "Nervousness is good. It shows you care." And caring is what often one intuitively arrives at in my world of publishing, because I literally publish for the world across languages. And you begin to care first when you discover the writing, somebody else's world that emerges through the text. And you form a certain image of them. You get moved, or its opposite sometimes. But sometimes you don't meet the writer for ages. Right? So I would have published Andrea well before we even thought that we would meet. And when I read the book, her latest book, Omerta, which is the second book that we've published, I wrote a few poems as an immediate response, which I would like to share with Andrea and therefore you, as a kind of way of getting into silences and its opposite, some form of a conversation. Voices softened, hushed, turned mute, fade, sink into silence, gone. One by one, the happy musicians, abruptly, like laughter, slicing the silence into halves, she swallowed first the half, whole, and then the other half, also whole. Now she lives in stillness, her own. A silence long measured, indifferent, like a gnawing pause. May I request you to read a little, to respond in your own way, and to give us a sense of this is a vast book. It traverses not just languages and individuals, and it's almost like 4 books actually, but we'll come to that.
First, let me say also thank you for this opportunity to talk to you and be here. I will read from Kali's book, And Kali is not what you think, and probably not what Hungarians think, because Hungarians don't really recognize this name. She's a woman, a middle-aged woman, and these are the opening lines of the book. I have done the right thing. Sure as eggs is eggs, because I have known for ages. I was thinking about it all the time, just didn't dare. You have to give yourself some encouragement, because if you don't, you can turn back from the road when you shouldn't be turning onto it. Anyhow, this time I said to myself, look here, Kali, off you go, keep going as far as you can see. It's dark, but that's what you need. Go now while it's pitch dark. Leave everything you have got, turn your back, wash your hands off it. Make for them hills, never mind if you can't see them. Can't tell the sky from the ground. They blend so exactly in the distance. Well then, I'm Green Kali Szabó. And I will tell you straight, whoever listening, I'm going to tell you my story. And it's starting right now. But people don't listen to folk tales like they did in the old days. They have got out of the way of listening to folk tales and stories. Women and girls sometimes still do when they are sitting and working together. It's mostly them what still listens. And they only tell folk tales like that to children, but not once they have grown out of being children. And in our village, everybody used to know such lovely ones. I learned them as well from my mother, but I have lost the way of it because there has been nobody to listen. There's only a folk tale if there is somebody to listen to it. Priests don't preach by themselves to the mice in the church. Though they mostly do now, people don't care for priests these days. But I can't keep quiet. I have always got to be talking. Because if I shut up, I get so miserable, I feel like jumping down the well. Like that poor Shari Juhos. So either I must get away from there or jump down to the well, so that I can have no more story. And I have to tell folk tales as nobody else, as not to be so lonely. Because the turn of my life had taken, there's nobody to listen, and I had made the bad life for myself. Only perhaps I can still fix it. I will just have one last try, then I will be the well for me, same as little Shari was. My name is Kali Szabó. In full, Green Kali Szabó. Because there were two of us in the village of that name, and when it happens that both of you are given a nickname, and I'm called Green because the fence by our house in Forrószék was green. Or rather my parents' house, but that's in the past because I live not there any longer. And I went that way as I left the village because it happened to be near where I lived. But I will tell you about what that time comes. The other girl was called Long Kali Szabó. She was as long as a summer day, because that's how summer days are. So long they never mean to end for people to leave the fields and go home. But now I have turned my back on the whole stinking village. I have left. I certainly have, and straight away I am into a thick of telling lies. Because that's how people are. When they start to tell about their own lives and go off the way of truth, they go further and further into the dense forest with their lying. Only down our way here in the village, there are not a bit of forest for you to enjoy looking at, so I don't mean a real forest with trees. because the first day of my life I went wrong telling lies. That's the way I am. I have been telling lies since I was a little girl. So that's why I'm also called Folktail Collie. Folktail Green Collie Sobble. Because I don't always say straight away why I have come if anybody asks. I just tell a nice lie and I have believed it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We will, of course, be coming back to the book, to this conversation and its characters and so on and so forth. And we hope that she will read many more passages, but just a little scenario about life and the mind. And because that's connected to what I first want to ask you, which is that in our world of storytelling, we are comrades in our wanderings. We seek, all of us. This is an essential and vital difference between us and the ones who travel. Our seeking is never touristic. A travelogue of the mind is never that. It cannot be. Discovery, yes, but more through exploration of hitherto uncharted, even untrampled lands. The thing about a life of the mind is that it all looks familiar. To touch, to feel, but when you actually do feel your way through it, everything appears new, for it is new. I would go so far as to say it is full of wonder and magic, as in undiscovered, somewhat like your discovery of pleasure. So yes, whoever has a secret has a soul, and the soul has a task, self-appointed perhaps, but a task to do things intuitively and to go out on a limb each time. So my question to you, dear Andrea, author and now friend, I hope, about your mind. Talk to us about your mind and the many lives that reside within this literary mind. To start you off, let me gather words from your own mouth. Quote, accidentally finding characters gathered into a space. Something is always missing, unresolved, maybe unsolved. This, from your conversation with Bishan in Calcutta, was something I picked up and it resonated with me. May serve as a way into getting into the lives that reside, that become your literary work.
Now we enter that part of the conversation for which we don't have a script. And it's the uncharted part. And writing is often, especially, I think, poetry, short story, novel are very similar from this point of view, that you might have a plan. For a novel as big as this, I would need a little bit of plan. But I never know how to go from A point to B point. It might take 5 sentences, or it might be 50 pages. And only when I enter the situation of writing full sentences, I realize what is happening, but not beforehand. It's very similar what often people do in theater when they rehearse, and they will say, this is situation A and situation B, and this might be given by the director to the actor, and the actor will have these only 2 moments he or she would know about, but not having a knowledge how to get from here to there and what will happen in this process. So the frightening and the more appealing part of writing is staying, as Francis Bacon, the painter, Francis Bacon, the British painter of the 20th century, said, to be in front of the white canvas and to see if something happens. And maybe today something happened. Yesterday nothing happened, and 2 days ago again nothing happened. But you still go back to this empty canvas and sit there. Of course, when you already have a material, and from this point probably prose and novel and poetry, they might start to differ, because with a novel, you often go back to a certain material you have already gathered and you add something. It's more like sculpting, maybe, or putting more material on something, on the bones of which you are imagining, but that is not yet a being. It has no meat and it has no expression, or it has
no flesh.
No flesh and no warmth. And you go back to that certain material. So you already have something, but in here and now, something had to happen again, which is writing, and not very much is known about that moment. And I think that you already mentioned the word intuition. In Western tradition, I think they spoke a lot, especially in the 19th century, about inspiration, which is a word I'm very seldom would use. It's too loaded, and this kind of 19th century romantic view of...
Yeah, it's like a thunderbolt.
Yes, and you sit there and something happens. But I think writing is not really like that. I mean, it's not something you are given without an effort. There is an effort you have to do, and only based on that effort, intuition will work in the way. But going back to the original question, this kind of white canvas, which is very, very appealing and very, very frightening in the same moment, attractive, invites to the moment. So it happens, the sentence happens, the writing happens.
This white canvas is it's an oft-repeated motif, but it's amazing how each time it is the blankness of it, right, compared again to the blankness of a white sheet of paper, whether it's ruled or not ruled. There's a kind of parallel there. And I've often felt that in the writing process, the sort of rejecting of what you have written intuitively and crumpling it and throwing it away. I've often gone back personally to the crumpled sheets and smoothened the injustice, as it were, and actually found words that made sense, because there's no such thing in my mind as a completely unusable word or language. And languages, I think, are very important, certainly as far as your writing is concerned, and I'm hoping that we'll come to that. But just one little provocation, if I may, about the intuitive. The intuitive has a home, solitude. And the more knowledge you gather, the more books you read, the more alone you are. And don't forget, writing can be a very lonely process, in a nice kind of way too. it's not in the way of the hermit or, or retreating into some kind of a silence with advancing age. You become a seeker of that which is a quietus, that which lives in silence, amidst the din of dailiness, actively inviting melancholy, which I see as a virtue. Perhaps I'm not advocating I don't want to make a case for reclusiveness as a kind of virtue. I'm simply suggesting a life of solitude that is aware, alive, introspective, and ever so sensual, like words, like language. I want you to respond to some of these thoughts. You already have talked about the intuitive. If they resonate with you, and if possible, invite us into your, if such a thing is again possible, we are a small, intimate audience, invite us into yourself where the writing awaits, lives, breathes, and tell us why this urge to write. What is this storytelling, where it may have begun? You as a young person evolving over time into the you as a woman of letters or words, or to put it less convolutedly, some kind of a sketch, a memoir, the fact that you've rehearsed all your life for this one moment at G5A now in Bombay.
I would like to go back and elaborate a little bit on intuition, because I find this very interesting in the process, that intuition is basically, I think it's based on that solitude you are talking about, and it's this great expression you had, this invitation of melancholy, but it's also based on some expertise and experience. You have the intuition because it's based on knowledge. It's because of your practice and expertise and experience. Without this basement, intuition will not come.
It will become inspiration then.
It will
falls
be,
into that trip.
And my books are often based very much on lots of research. In this book, I have a rose gardener, and I do a lot of research in historical materials and sociology, but mostly historical materials. And often I'm looking for something which I won't be able to find for many reasons. Often because these are so-called the big moments of history. And in those moments, many things, many documents just disappear. They are destroyed purposely, or they are stolen, or they are just they are not enough valuable to be preserved. And there is an empty space. I'm looking for something, and I know that these things might have existed, but they are not there. They are not in the archives, so I can't find them. And that moment is sometimes an opening, an invitation to look at something which I didn't find, but it existed, and I can work with the imagination. So it's, on one hand, it's a black hole. On the other hand, a white canvas.
Mm-hmm.
So something, because historians will work with what they find, or partly it's missing, but they find other parts which could create the whole. But for an artist, these kind of black holes are invitations to imagine what happened to that piece of reality, so to speak, or document. And that's a great invitation. And going back to this intuition question, I never try to explain at the beginning why something is so appealing. I wrote a novel, a different book about two medical students in a certain historical moment, and I was very, very engaged in the history of medicine. And I did not want to explain myself why that is so interesting. That I spent years with researching history of medicine, or why I spent so much time in researching a rose breeder's life, or the rose breeding itself, or how history and rose breeding relates to each other. Why is that so important? Because if I would start to have an answer for myself, why is this so appealing, then probably the whole idea of creating something around would in a way melt or disappear, or get an answer which I don't want to have. And in the process of writing, it's still not explaining why this material is so important here and now to be written. But then comes a moment, because intuition is probably like a kind of response based on what knowledge is and expertise is. But then comes a moment when I'm trying to understand what I have written and what is my intuition based on, because you might be wrong with your intuition very often.
Of course.
Yes. And then there is kind of a later moment in writing, especially long things, that you have to understand why you have done that, why you took those decisions and not different ones. Going back to the question of writing and the kind of beginning of writing, I come from an environment. I was born in a Hungarian family in Romania, and I have a very, very dear friend who is an old woman, and she said once, she was a very good friend of my father too, and she said once that I represent a triple minority. As a Hungarian in Romania, as a Hungarian Jew in Romania, as a Hungarian Jewish woman in Romania. And this is the environment, a little bit of my family too, which is partly Jewish and a bigger part is Hungarian, with at least 3 different religions, and religion never played any role in my family. I never saw anybody praying, no grandmothers or grandfathers praying ever. So it's a kind of very secular environment. And because I was raised in Romania during a dictatorship, and probably my whole magic box of my childhood is this dictatorship, so to speak. Often in magic boxes, you have not only nice things, but also ugly ones. The spoken word, the language played a very important role. Theater was important. Church was very important, because in church people could use the language. School was important, but school were closed down. My school of Hungarian language was also closed down. So language was a very important part of your identity and the identity of belonging to a certain community, but also of resistance. Language might be a tool of resistance. And because it was a very tough dictatorship and a very poor country, very, very poor country, with hunger, with no running water, no running hot water and stuff like that. Art and literature was a form of escaping from this reality. We had no television. Television showed only the dictator and his speeches. So there was no kind of funny films or like television as a offer. Reading was one of the few things you could do as a free person. So to read was also a form of resistance. And this whole story comes also grandmother, one of my beloved grandmother, who was a very nice storyteller. She wanted to be a painter, but women of that generation rarely could become an artist. But she was telling stories about her youth, her beautiful past, and storytelling was very entertaining and very connecting, a deep connection between people, which I still see storytelling as something which connects people in a symbolic way, because we are not there when we read. The reading is a solitary thing, as writing, you just said. But reading is also solitary. So I think reading and writing is the way I can connect to the world.
Book of Silences, that's me at the moment. Well, I think we need you to read some more.
I will read you from the book of Vilmos, who is the gardener. His name is Vilmos Deci.
Mm-hmm.
In this conversation, we didn't need to speak through an interpreter. It was all securely in a single language, the common language of gardeners. I could see the embassy man becoming anxious, as he didn't know what we were talking about. That Gheorghe from the embassy became agitated if I spoke to someone without him. Unfortunately, I couldn't fully understand what Francis Meilland, the French gardener, said, as he spoke in French, which is written one way and pronounced another. When it's written down, I can make out this and that by comparing it with Romanian. Never mind, I thought. Even so, I have spoken to him. He would be back, he said, with the committee. What committee? I asked, and I said to the interpreter, ask him. It emerged that the whole committee was judging, and he was the president. On his way out, he asked me to go and see him. I told the interpreter to translate exactly what Monsieur was saying. He would like to have a talk with me, Meilland said. I should go round and see him after the pavilion was closed, and we would have dinner. The interpreter didn't even translate my reply, but said that it was impossible. Why? I asked. It was so important to me, I wanted to go. You can't, he replied, because there is a reception at the Bulgarian embassy. I'm not interested in that, I replied. I'm not going to that meeting. We began to argue. Meilland said that he had to be off. The embassy man explained that I had to go to the Bulgarian embassy as a representative of the plant research fraternity of the Romanian People's Republic, because Bulgaria was also People's Republic, with which we had common economic interest. Then Gheorghe from the embassy asked who Charles P. Kilham was that we had been talking about, as he needed to know. I said that it was the father plant, tata in Romanian. I mustn't play jokes on him, because he had to put in his report whom I talked about with a Frenchman. I told him we had been talking about ancestors, mothers, ancestors, fathers of my rose. He gave me a funny look and wrote something down. Charles P. Kilham was a father of American origin. In Romania, he had married the Ville de Paris. Who was that? That was the mother that I used. 2 splendid parents. Blow you, Gheorghe, I thought. I'm not helping you anymore. Get lost. I told that Gheorghe to say in his report that in Vilmos Deci's opinion there was no greater man alive than Francis Meilland, and that he had succeeded in having a 10-minute talk with him, and that, furthermore, à deux, without an interpreter. there had definitely been a gleam in Marianne's eyes when he had been looking at my flowers, and that I immediately howled and shouted for joy. Put that in. Well, I didn't say that. The hell I did. All that I said was get lost. I had spoken to Marianne. I didn't need written permission for that.
Thank you. I want to linger a little bit and sort of, only because the times are very dark. There have been other dark times, and there will be darker times, and so on and so forth. And I want to sort of suggest that writers are, I mean, we know this is not a new thought. They are beings of resistance, as are readers. Books are the first, the destruction of books is the first victims of any form of dictatorship or authoritarian regimes. And now the world is seeing it. You're seeing it, we have seen it, we are seeing it. So I had a little text which I wrote about arresting language, which I will share with you and then ask you. The first thing he did was to put the languages under arrest. All of them. That's not all. He even put the dialects in jail so as to reduce the agitated babble to silence. He isolated them, solitary confinement. Then he proceeded to strip them naked, men, women, children. No one was spared, thus reducing them into bare flesh and bones over time through a controlled starvation diet. Meanwhile, his men in black gathered all the name tags that the prisoners had worn and went about the task of mixing the one with the other, causing immense confusion in a bizarre revelry of a ritual reminiscent of a lottery, an incoherent alphabet unable to find its way home. The question is, an entire lifetime of alphabets attempting to find their way home through the act of writing, reading, writers as beings of resistance, writing as an act of, and we've heard this often, bearing witness. And to quote you in one of your interviews, quote, "We live here in this lovely Hungarian world. We walk in the street. Our life is made up of all sorts of crap. And in 50 years, we look back on this as if it were in horror. This can resonate here." How do you feel about this in the current authoritarian regime in our countries? Censorship and freedom curtailed as the new normal. And distance. How does one rewind? How does one write about these while they're unfolding? Between that which happened at a particular time and left scars and wounds on not just the individual mind, but the national one. So bearing witness, the fact that you and I as writers need distance and time to be able to write. We are still, after 75 years, writing about our own partition. So just some form of elaboration or comment. So.
I think one of the most difficult things about writing or creating, or to put it more widely, to be an artist, is to find a balance between being very close to the present and trying to make the effort to understand the present and accept the fact that you won't understand it fully, and also to create the distance which you need for reflection. And this is a very difficult balance, because if all your energy would go into looking around and trying to grasp what the world is about right now, what are the processes, what are the sorrows of the present, that would not offer you the distance you need to write, to reflect, and to find a different world. Because fiction, and I'm probably entitled only to speak about fiction, is a different world, is creating kind of independent worlds which have very deep connection to the world which we are living in, but they are still created and in a way independent, often closed with some openings also. I find this balance also difficult in the very, so to speak, practical sense. When I connect the world, when I will comment on this world, when I would be open about my opinion about current political situation of, let's say, my Hungarian environment, and when I step back, be silent, and let things in a way happen without me being vocal, because in a way I'm not able to be all the time vocal, and I would think that that's not very helpful to do the work also. So this kind of balance of being close to and distant from, it's a tricky thing to find. It's also about your inner balance. Both ways in which you are either or would make things impossible to work. I mean, those people who are very much in the present only and very vocal about their opinion about the present, I see that they lose the energy to create something which is more distant from this present moment. And if you would like to create an island which is independent from this environment, it is completely impossible, because that would be a lie. Islands never worked. We live in this world. We are connected to the world. For me, always the moment when I try to say my opinion is the moment when I feel that I cannot be silent anymore, that all my thoughts are around something I have to express, which is an opinion, a pain, probably often my personal pain in a relationship to something which is going around. I in all the time I mostly express my opinion in interviews. Nowadays, I feel more simple to express opinion in social media and not wait until somebody comes and asks me a kind of question. I deal a lot with history, and most of my books, or all of my books, are around painful histories of Hungarians and Romanians, which must be very familiar to you in a very strange way, because you have your pains. And when I'm reading the stories of partition, that's us. Okay, I just had this very strange experience that what Hungarian-Romanian relationship is, it's very understandable in this country. It's more understandable than I imagined before coming here. This history is very little digested by both societies, and very not digested. It's not a good word, because we don't really digest history. We try to understand it, try to approach it, and try to create a space in which both discourses, because there are two very different discourses of our histories, can have a voice, can have a space for it, and in a way can be heard. So I think, and some of my books are, it's very strange to learn that some of my books are used in teaching history, even in the universities, because of course literature is about human beings and about characters, and I try to look through certain moments of history through the eyes of the characters and see, and it's trying to imagine how somebody would have felt in a certain moment of the history, in a certain space. And this is what the task is, so to speak, to imagine how that human feels and what is his angle. My angle on history is also a little bit, it always has something missing. I mean, and I personally experienced that we don't have a full understanding of our present. It's not possible. We don't know what is really going on and what are the decision-making processes and why are those processes going on, etc. So all of my characters, even those who try to understand history, they won't understand fully. So I'm not writing with the knowledge of a narrator who has a better knowledge and invites the reader to kind of be taught by what I have researched. But it's something I am inviting the reader to reflect on and maybe search upon. It's not a knowledge somebody would offer as a ready-made food, but you are trying, or the reader hopefully is trying to create that food with the ingredients the book offers.
Something is missing. And that's interesting because there is a kind of sense these days of, certainly a certain kind of loss. There's also a sense of having to seek, particularly in history, in our country, for example, it's being, quote unquote, if you're sympathetic, you will say it is merely being rewritten. Some would call it being erased. We know that, you know that. But strangely enough, I've recently felt that when they rewrite our textbooks as they're doing now in history, we are such a widespread diaspora all over the world that there are some histories that are being written there which claim to be different because they see them from a distance, a safe distance from physical incarceration. And then there is this government that is rewriting, erasing here, and going after institutions. For example, I feel there's another history which newspaper archives in our country have, which could potentially become targets because they would be different from what the official version is. And in this context, when I practice photography and I am responding to so-called atrocities in time and photographing them 20 years later or 22 years later, or at that moment when something happens, this seems to be under the radar because I get the sense if these are preserved, either accidentally through collections or elsewhere, that becomes another version of history 40 years later when some great-grandchild wakes up and says, are these pictures about this particular place, this happened, what was that? Because we've always found this missing from our books. So I don't know, just a random set of responses. But this might be a good time for uh, a short reading. I'd like you to read some, and then I want you to talk about home, but I shall bring you to that.
Maybe two small bites from the book of Eleonora. She's a Catholic nun. It starts with the Romanian word graziere. Graziere. We were now to receive clemency. None of us that walk in Christ dare stand up and say that it wasn't the Romanian People's Republic that was showing clemency, but Lord, who was gracious to all. As we said in our prayers next day too, thus we betrayed the Lord. He was gracious to us, set us free, but we were silent and didn't speak his name and give thanks openly for all to hear. We daren't thank him with our voices. Every sinner was silent. Or did actually speak, because the next day we all had to stand up and say together out loud, I, Rózsa Bugyka, this is my name, thank the Romanian Workers' Party and the Romanian People's Republic for the granting me clemency, and I swear, I prefer to say silently to myself, I, Sister Eleonora. My God, this way my second oath. I had already sworn the first, the oath for life, but to a much mightier Lord. And there I was doing it again. Was I breaking my great oath if I repeated it now? I was swearing to my fatherland and to the party. The mouth of man is filled. How did old Mickey Weiss put it, our teacher, the professor of dentistry? There is nothing that stinks worse than the human mouth. And a bit from the beginning of this Eleonora book. I'm only telling this for my sister's sake, and for her sake because she has asked me so often. I have told her that anybody that gets the sort of request that I have had doesn't talk about themselves. We are not used to talking about ourselves. It's not right. And she must understand this. The person doesn't matter. Anybody that talks discriminates because they choose themselves. But then we don't choose ourselves. We are chosen. And I haven't even got any words to speak. I didn't embark on this path in order to speak in my own words. That's what prayer is for. Actually, I very much prefer set prayers. There's no need to make them up. Every word is ready laid down. Comes from the Lord. You just have to put your heart into it. These days, I don't like praying in my own words, because we pray differently, don't we? Every word we say is not from ourselves. My sister wants to know all the time what happened in there. Well, am I to be able to tell her? She must understand that I am forbidden to do that. I told her so. I have signed the omerta. But she even brought an exercise book so that if I can't speak, I should write it down, because that would be easier for me. If I described in writing, it would help me to forget, she says. I had recover from it because, in her view, I'm sick. But look here, the Lord's preserved me. I'm not sick. When she writes something down, it's no longer in her head, but on paper, she says. That's why mankind writes so many books and newspapers and all those letters, so as not to keep things in their heads. Write it down and it's forgotten. That's true too. Our Lord just once wrote something in the dust with the stuff. Not even the Holy Scripture remembered that, but we remember every day in our transubstantiated bread and wine. But I told her I'm only going to tell her about release and clemency, nothing else, especially clemency, because they believe that it is that they have granted it. They are going to be proved wrong. That came not from them, but from the Lord. And I'm not going to give a full account from the beginning. If I told her everything like that, the poor girl would go mad. She doesn't need to know. She cries enough as it is. But now I'm out. The Lord has preserved me. Why should she cry now? I wanted to reflect a little bit on what you offered earlier about how power controls language. And I think that power always wants to be in the control of the language. To tell us what and how should we understand certain things and words and how should we behave. If I think about how the authoritarian, or as they call it, illiberal Hungarian government defines what is family, that is control of the language. Family in our country is now understood as a relationship, as a marriage between a man and a woman. That understanding of family would exclude many, many, many other forms of lives. And so it would exclude a mother, a single mother. It would exclude, of course, gay couples. It would exclude somebody who decides to be to have a solitary life, etc. So language is it's always very much controlled by, so to speak, evil powers to define things or to tell us how should we feel about our home country, which was your other path you offered for discussion.
Well, this is a good time to ruminate and introspect about home and its opposite, homelessness. Perhaps also if you wish to talk about family, your family as home, your parents, even their parents, family as a space of love. Allow us into your relationship. Make memory your guide. The Romania and the Hungary of then and now, your history and of motion, movement, migration, nationality, Romania, Hungary, Romania, the back and forth, the effect this has on the mind, the self. The religions your inherited memory may constantly traverse, travel, think about, Catholic and Jewish. Forgive me, I'm being greedy, but...
Yeah, it's... I think I should start with the idea that in the Christian tradition, home is often considered the paradise. And in Christian tradition, paradise is something we have lost. We have fallen out from the paradise. And there is an offer in Christian religion that from this earth, those who are faithful think that there is another world which is way back to the paradise. So I think this understanding of falling out from the paradise, falling out from the good, shapes very much our idea of where is a good life, where is a good offer for life. I wrote a book called Home, which I try to toy a lot, also not so much with this Christian tradition, but more with this very, very loaded word, especially in countries, nationalist countries like mine, to be loyal to your home, loyal to your country, is almost an expectation of the power. And often some certain words, and home is one of these words, are very difficult to use nowadays because in a way they are taken by the power, by the political power. And what I was trying to do in this book is to reshape the world, the word. And I think literature can really do something to take back those very, in a way, badly loaded words and to give them a new aura and to give them new sense and new stories and to, in a way, to reclaim them. So it's a tricky thing to do because I was trying to understand why is in us as humans, but also in non-humans, this longing for a place, longing for a place and time, and why so difficult to leave a place which you could consider home. And I was trying to also a little bit to look at my own emotions of leaving my home country and creating a new life. And is it possible to have two homes? My personal answer, the book has no answer, of course. Books don't give any answers. They have maybe questions and stories to tell. But my personal answer is I think I have two homes, not only a double citizenship, but also I have a very deep relationship to the place where I am from, and all my books are even making this relationship richer and bigger and more complicated. But I also have a new home, and where my family is a home, which is very difficult to leave. Often in these very bad times, of course, families have to take decisions. Shall we stay? Shall we leave? And for me, personally, it was a very difficult answer. Of course, I'm growing old, and the older you are, the less you feel like it's the right moment to leave again.
Yeah, the young can go away sooner.
Yes. Maybe just an image of how I imagine this difficulty of leaving. From my kitchen, I saw a beautiful tree, which gives some nice fruits in October. Actually, it's in our small garden. And I have a very deep relationship to this tree. And I see myself rather like this tree, which was very sick for years, but we cured this beautiful tree. It's very difficult to take a tree from somewhere and to put it with its huge roots elsewhere. So I little bit see myself not only in this deep relationship to the tree, but also as a tree. Family is a the two representatives are here in the first row. It was a big gift to travel together with family to India. Family is I think it's a kind of place to practice love, and any place where you can practice love. Practice means a kind of dynamic giving and getting energy and getting love. It's a home because it's a safe place, a safe but active place, and it's activated by this energy and love. My family was born, I just explained to someone that we all speak Hungarian, but part of the family is born in Hungary and part of it in Romania. It's also just a footnote. I am Hungarian, but when I left my country, in a way, I have a different culture than those Hungarians who were born and raised in Hungary. We were not able to sing the same songs, or we saw not the same films. We were raised in different political regimes, and we had different sensibility toward this feeling of being a minority person. So even if we share culture and language, we might be very, very different. And often Hungarians who come from Romania experience this kind of otherness. And I think this kind of otherness is something I was given in my family where I was born, and I'm bringing this otherness everywhere where I am. Although I don't feel any more unwelcomed, or politically, yes, maybe, but that's another story. To be politically unwelcomed in a country, but not culturally anymore. And I think my books added something to the understanding also of the Hungarian relationship. So that kind of complicated relationships of people who are not born in the same country.
What do you feel about writing for the sake of writing? I mean, I say this specifically because as a publisher, or one who claims also to be able to write, I mean, it's a random thought about this business of books, this urge to publish, to sort of, it's no longer, we have a tradition here in our music of what we call practice, a dailiness, a riyaz is the word we use. And I feel that I was accidentally published. And otherwise I would have carried on writing for 15 years, 20 years, you just carry on. And I actually know a wonderful German writer, Reinhard Jörgel, who consciously decided to stop being published because he was exhausted with the business of books. And he wrote to me, we write letters to each other, and he said that this does not mean that I will stop writing, but I will write for my drawers. And I was, of course, had different alarm bells because he was from East Germany, and writing for your drawer, hidden, clandestine, it took on all kinds of. So I told him, I'm very close to your German publisher, so I cannot keep this a secret. He said, no, I want you to know first, and then I will tell them. And it's now been about, since 2017, he just writes. He's written many books, but they're just there, right? So your thoughts on writing for the sake of writing.
I love this idea. I also write for my drawer. Last year I wrote at least, I think, 80 or 100 poems, but I never published poem. I also wrote some poems here in India, but it's not for publishing. It might come at some moment, but I don't really feel that I'm exercising writing poetry so that at some point I could publish them. I don't feel that urge at all. Poetry is a kind of different way of communicating and in a way to touch the world and to have a little reflection on something. I recently started to write my diary as poetry because the prose is something I really do, and it's that's a work, and maybe poetry should not be a work. But also when I'm working on a novel, I try to make the process longer. it could be faster than it is. And I just told my publishing house and editor that I'm not going to finish this novel I'm working on right now this year, and maybe not next year. So to make things slower, for the same reason, because it's too much happening when there is a book is out. But in the same time, I can only write a book, and I'm talking about a novel, when I feel very much the urge that I'm trying to tell a story and to complete a story. To complete would not mean to publish it, but to make it complete, to finish it. Because of course, writing is hard, and every second day I would like to abandon it and to give it up, because it would be much better to start a new one. I have much better ideas for a new one than to finish the one I'm working on. And there is a moment, and I always felt that moment when I'm finishing a book, that I would like to invite somebody in and to let the thing go. Because it is the reason I'm writing, that somebody should step in, and I would like to share it. So the prose, I also read my poetry a little bit, mostly to my husband, and sometimes to a friend or two, but not like overwhelming that, look what poem I wrote today. So not mainly, and also we had a very nice old dog, and grieving for that dog, he lived 17 years. They actually, most of Kolkata dogs look like him, which was very, very strange. And grieving for the dog was is what easier through the poems than in anything else. So it's very important for me, and continuing this idea you offered with your writer friend, German friend, to keep somewhat a silence around writing. Not to... I never publish a piece from my novel. Look, this is what I'm writing now. Because it's a novel is a novel. It's not a short story or a text. And that silence helps the book to, in a way, to grow. Because a novel is growing during the midnight, not only while you are writing it, but when you distance yourself from the material you have done. I often need a lot of distance, and that distance is months without touching the manuscript and without reading it. It's more reflecting on what I have done. But I very, very seldom talk about what I'm doing, because I'm not sure what I'm doing. I have to understand what I'm doing and also why I am doing it. And if you talk too much, then it's like
it's done.
It's done, yeah. The secret of it and the wheel, because there is a wheel between or around a work of art. It's like looking on under the wheel, and I am not supposed to do that.
That's very beautiful. Yeah, I understand this because I used to have a painter friend. The first time I experienced painting other than in books was way back, late 70s, early 80s, and I then would go on to show his work and exhibit and so on and so forth. And we became very close, and it took me some 8 years to realize that in my excitement as a theater, lighting, set designing being, I could respond to ideas and add to them. So every time we had a intellectual discussion about something, because he didn't just want to paint, he wanted to create large pieces in sound and light and metal and so on and so forth. I would get carried away as a friend and come up with ideas till I realized that that was the wrong thing to do, because for him it was done, executed, filed. He needed fresh ideas, but they would have to come and not be talked about with anybody other than himself and his practice. And then, so that was just a thought that interested me when you said the silence around. I thought maybe we should go back to what should have been the beginning, which is Omerta, and how you came to give birth to this Book of Silences. The characters, especially the two women, the nun, and then, of course, the wonderful creation of one who breeds roses, Vilmos. This is a literary creation that can only happen, excuse my repeating word, with intuitive insight. Perhaps you may wish to elaborate. Be good at this point to connect with your inner voice and process and share thoughts on the writing of this book and how the themes came together. You're quoted somewhere as saying, "I am not in the position to judge the protagonists." This intrigues me, for it suggests that your characters have rights and are free to think thoughts and do things they feel they must do without fear of judgment. Perhaps also talk about how fluidity of the personal merges with one's literary creatures and how our memories find their presence in the characters we create.
I remember very well the moment when the rose breeder came to my mind. We were traveling from my native town, Kolozsvár, Cluj in Romanian, to Budapest. So I was between the countries, so to speak, between my homes. And we were discussing certain personalities, and somebody mentioned a foremost biologist from my native town who was very famous in the 50s, and he was very successful as a Hungarian. And a Hungarian rose breeder in a dictatorship, successful. And I felt when, an insect is biting you or something that, what's that? What's there? And I took home this kind of a strange meeting of things. And often a novel is a very strange meeting of things. I often imagine a novel of putting together at least 50 important things. And these are very, very different things. And you are trying to create a world in which all these 50 things can have a space and exist, which is very difficult to do because they are so different and they have absolutely no connection. What a rose breeder has to do with a nun who was in prison, or a storyteller who is running away from his alcoholic family. And the beginning is probably always a little bit of reflection. Why is this interesting for you? I'm asking myself. And I realize that if I cannot get rid of this kind of first moment of illumination, if I can get rid of it, if I can forget it, then it's okay. I have nothing to do with it. But if I cannot forget it and it comes back very often. And I started to read about agriculture in the 50s, which is not something very interesting. But from the other point of view, it's very interesting because it's the moment when horses are killed and replaced by tractors. And it's a very sad moment, we call it modernization, of course, but it's still very sad if you have a horse. I wanted to write a fifth book because there are four in Omerta, four voices, four characters, but I wanted to write a fifth one of a horse. And I started to write it, and I couldn't. It was too fairy tale-like. Of course, every work has a failure too. I mean, you fail to do something. You realize that you don't have the power to do that. A little bit remained from the horse, a very, very nice character, I guess. And then I start to plunge in a space and time and to swim and see what comes, because randomly things will come. I'm not very much interested in the kind of big history, and I'm not even able to give you a full account of the 50s in Hungary or Romania, because this is not what I do. But the process is being with open eyes and trying to see what is the offer. And I would call this, what is the context of that character I'm trying to work with? A rose breeder, a Hungarian rose breeder in Romania in the 50s, which has a very big Soviet impact, that period, and the whole power situation is quite complicated. So very strange characters will come, and some of them will have to go because they don't have the power to tell their own story. I mean, it's not them who don't have the power, but it's probably the storyteller who will lack the ability. I try to give voice to those people who have not really present in contemporary literature. A peasant woman, especially, I was very much afraid when it was published in Hungarian, because the first woman is very much in dialect. It is in dialect in English. I did a trick when I read now, because I'm not able to read in that dialect, but she's in strong dialect. And if something is very, very strange in contemporary Hungarian literature, is dialect. Nobody would like to listen to texts in dialect. It's considered uncultured and like something very low class and whatsoever. Also, to talk about a nun, or to have a voice of a nun, who is, again, very unheard in literature, because to be a Catholic, faithful Catholic, is something very strange. It's like she has to go to a psychologist first and then take the decision to become a nun. So unaccepted, basically. And to find, of course, you are not constructing a text with this purpose. It's just, you imagine unheard voices, and this is a kind of white canvas. It's a terra incognita you are going to. This person is unknown. Why? But she's so wonderful. She tells stories. She has a kind of inner energy. Or a Catholic nun. She's beautiful. I have to convince the reader that she is beautiful. Or there is such a choice in them. Or was such a choice, but still is, that you can devote yourself to God. So it's a lot of looking around, and there is that moment I try to withhold writing until I feel I cannot stop. I should stop reading because I cannot withhold. It's like It's the pressure that something really wants to come out. But till I can withhold, I do withhold it. So it's quite a long process of looking around. My son was small when I wrote this book. He's taller than me right now. And it's a very difficult thing to write as a mother with a small kid. And I woke up at 3:30 in the morning, especially in the summer when a boy doesn't go anywhere. He's at home happily with the family. And by 4 o'clock in early morning, I was already writing. And I wrote 2 or 3 hours, not more, because then family life started. And I never work more than 3 hours, probably 3, 4. It's like 4 is like a marathon already, because it's very much a huge concentration writing. And I wrote in a very small space, like Thomas Bernhard had very small spaces to write. It's like a really small room, and it's behind our house, a little workshop. And I looked at the rose garden. I was planting the rose garden in order to understand what is this work, because I had to have an experience of that. And the sun was, I don't know, at 5 or 6 coming up, and it was very silent. And it was a process in which I stood with one character for a long time, and then I switched to another one. So it was like a role playing. For a while I was this, and for another longer period another character, and also trying to find that kind of language which differs very much from each other. And then the difficult moment is when you are working with the whole text and you jump from one character to another, and it's being a very difficult and different kind of work, because it needs a lot of consciousness, and it's not that kind of intuitive work anymore, but it's more about controlling your whole text. And I was very afraid of giving voice to people who I am not, and who are in a way voiceless but still very vulnerable. This is a very difficult ethical question. Are you allowed to do that, and how? And I probably choose the only way I was convinced that it's ethical is to try to understand them, even those characters who that character who I like less. Vilmos is not a really lovely guy sometimes. So to understand them, because understanding and listening to them, it's a form of love. So I was trying to listening to them as deep as I could, and that mornings were very good moments in the silence to listen to these voices.
Thank you very much, Andrea.
Thank you very much,
and thank
Naveen.
you very much. Andrea's still here outside in case you want a book. Thank you.
Thank you.